Simple CEO denied first-class seat. 30 minutes later, she fires the entire flight crew. What happened in that Boston airport terminal would change everything. When appearances deceive and power reveals itself, sometimes the most ordinary-looking person holds extraordinary influence. This is Claire's story. The automatic doors of Boston Logan International Airport whooshed open as Claire Donovan stepped inside, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished marble floor. At 42, she'd learned that comfort trumped fashion, especially during long flights. Her gray hoodie hung loosely over matching sweatpants, and her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. To anyone watching, she looked like just another tired traveler. Claire wheeled her modest black suitcase toward the Atlantic Air check-in counter, observing the bustling terminal around her. Business travelers in sharp suits rushed past, their expensive luggage gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Families gathered near the departure boards, children clutching stuffed animals, while parents juggled tickets and passports. She'd deliberately chosen this casual attire for a reason. After 15 years of building her company from a small startup to a multinational corporation, Claire had discovered something valuable. People revealed their true nature when they thought you were nobody special. Today's trip to Los Angeles wasn't just business, it was a test. The check-in area buzzed with activity. Multiple lines snaked in different directions, marked by velvet ropes and digital signs. First class, business, and economy divided passengers into their respective tiers. Claire approached the first-class line, her boarding pass and identification ready. Behind the polished counter stood Jessica Banks, a woman in her early 30s with dark hair pulled into a severe bun. Her black uniform was immaculate, complete with a silver name tag that caught the terminal's bright lighting. Jessica's sharp eyes scanned the approaching passengers with practiced efficiency, her expression professional, yet slightly bored. "Next," Jessica called out, her voice carrying across the check-in area. Claire stepped forward, placing her documents on the counter. "Good morning. I'm checking in for Flight 247 to Los Angeles." Jessica's gaze immediately swept over Claire's casual appearance, her eyebrows raising slightly. She picked up the boarding pass with 2 fingers, as if handling something distasteful. "First class?" Her tone carried a note of skepticism that wasn't lost on Claire. "That's correct," Claire replied calmly, maintaining her composure despite the obvious judgment in Jessica's voice. The airline employee's fingers clicked rapidly across her keyboard, her frown deepening as she studied her computer screen. Other passengers began forming a line behind Claire, their conversations creating a low hum of background noise. The smell of coffee from a nearby stand mixed with the airport's recycled air. "Ma'am," Jessica began, her voice taking on a condescending tone, "I'm showing some irregularities with your reservation. Are you sure this ticket belongs to you?" Claire felt her jaw tighten, but years of executive experience had taught her patience. "I'm quite certain. Perhaps you could double-check the system?" Jessica's laugh was barely concealed. "Oh, I've checked all right. This first-class seat costs more than most people make in a month. Are you absolutely positive this isn't some kind of mistake?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around them, other travelers began to notice the commotion, their conversations quieting as they sensed the tension building at the counter. Claire's blue eyes remained steady, but something flickered beneath the surface, a hint of steel that Jessica was too arrogant to notice. "Let me see your identification again," Jessica demanded, her tone growing more authoritative by the moment. She held Claire's driver's license up to the light, examining it with exaggerated scrutiny. "This looks legitimate, I suppose. But that doesn't explain how someone like you ended up with a first-class ticket." Claire watched Jessica's performance with growing fascination. In boardrooms across the country, she'd witnessed every type of power play imaginable, but this raw display of prejudice was almost refreshing in its honesty. "Someone like me?" she asked quietly. "Well," Jessica gestured dismissively at Claire's outfit, "let's just say our first-class passengers usually dress differently. They understand the standards expected in premium seating." Behind Claire, the line was growing longer. A businessman in an expensive suit checked his Rolex impatiently. A well-dressed elderly couple whispered to each other, clearly disapproving of the delay. The morning rush was in full swing, and Jessica's interrogation was creating a bottleneck. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to call my supervisor," Jessica announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "This ticket raises several red flags in our system." Amanda Foster, another Atlantic Air employee, approached from a neighboring counter. Her auburn hair was styled professionally, and her uniform bore additional stripes indicating seniority. "Is there a problem here, Jessica?" "This woman claims to own a first-class ticket," Jessica explained, her voice dripping with skepticism. "But looking at her, well, you can see the issue. I think we might be dealing with a fraudulent ticket situation." Amanda examined Claire's appearance with the same judgmental gaze. "I see what you mean. These premium tickets are quite expensive. Are you sure you didn't accidentally book the wrong class, honey? Economy might be more suitable for your budget." The condescension was palpable. Claire could feel the stares of other passengers boring into her back. Some seemed embarrassed by the spectacle, while others watched with the morbid curiosity of rubberneckers at an accident scene. "I'd like to speak with your manager," Claire said, her voice remaining remarkably calm despite the growing insult. Jessica exchanged a knowing look with Amanda. "The manager is very busy this morning. Perhaps we could resolve this more quickly if you simply accepted that there's been some kind of booking error. We'd be happy to find you a seat in economy class." "My ticket clearly states first class," Claire replied, pointing to the boarding pass. "I've paid for first class, and I expect first class." "Ma'am," Amanda interjected, "our first class cabin maintains certain standards. It's designed for business executives, celebrities, people of substance. Surely you can understand our concern about seating arrangements?" The implication was crystal clear. Claire's casual appearance had marked her as unworthy in their eyes. She thought about the irony. Here she was, probably making more in a day than these women earned in a year, being lectured about standards and substance. "Are you refusing to honor my ticket?" Claire asked, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge. Jessica's smile was thin and triumphant. "We're simply ensuring that all our passengers are comfortable. Sometimes that means making adjustments to seating arrangements." The word adjustments hung in the air like a slap. "I'm going to need you to step aside," Jessica declared, waving toward an empty area near the wall. "We have other passengers to serve, and this situation is causing delays." Claire glanced at the growing line of increasingly agitated travelers. The businessman with the Rolex was now tapping his foot audibly, while the elderly couple had begun shaking their heads in disapproval. She could hear fragments of their whispered conversations. "Holding up the entire line. Probably can't afford it anyway. Why don't they just move her along?" "I'm not stepping aside," Claire said firmly. "I have a confirmed reservation, I've paid for my ticket, and I have every right to check in." Amanda moved closer, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a reasonable tone. "Look, sweetie, we're trying to help you avoid embarrassment here. First-class passengers expect a certain caliber of fellow travelers. You'd probably be much more comfortable with people more like yourself in the back of the plane." The casual cruelty of the statement was breathtaking. Claire had faced hostile takeovers, aggressive competitors, and ruthless negotiations. But the pure, unfiltered prejudice on display here was almost impressive in its boldness. "More like myself?" Claire repeated, her eyebrows raising slightly. "You know what I mean," Jessica chimed in, emboldened by Amanda's support. "Our premium passengers pay top dollar for an exclusive experience. They don't expect to sit next to, well..." She gestured vaguely at Claire's hoodie and sweatpants, her meaning unmistakable. Kevin Russell, a middle-aged passenger in line behind Claire, stepped forward. "Excuse me, but I couldn't help overhearing. Are you seriously denying this woman her seat based on how she's dressed?" Jessica's professional mask slipped slightly. "Sir, this is an Atlantic Air matter. We're simply maintaining our quality standards." "Quality standards?" Kevin's voice rose incredulously. "She has a ticket. She's paid for her seat. What's the problem?" "The problem," Amanda said icily, "is that our first-class cabin has certain expectations. We can't have just anyone wandering in because they happen to scrape together enough money for a ticket." Dorothy Phillips, an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes, moved closer to the counter. At 78, She'd seen enough discrimination in her lifetime to recognize it immediately. "This is absolutely disgraceful," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd lived through multiple social movements. "You're treating this young woman shamefully." Jessica's face flushed. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but this is really none of your business." "Discrimination is everyone's business," Dorothy replied sharply. "I've been flying first class for 40 years, and I've never seen such appalling behavior from airline staff." More passengers were beginning to take notice. Phones appeared in hands as people started recording the confrontation. The terminal's background noise seemed to fade as the drama at the Atlantic air counter became the focus of attention. Claire watched it all unfold with growing amazement. She'd expected some level of poor service, but this blatant prejudice exceeded even her cynical expectations. The two employees seemed completely oblivious to how badly they were representing their company. "Ladies," Claire said quietly, "you might want to reconsider your approach." Jessica laughed harshly. "Is that some kind of threat?" "It's not a threat," Claire replied evenly. "It's advice, free advice, which is more than you deserve at this point." Jessica's face darkened. "I don't need advice from someone who probably bought that ticket with a stolen credit card." The accusation landed like a bombshell. Gasps rippled through the gathered passengers. Even Amanda looked shocked at her colleague's boldness. Claire felt something cold settle in her chest. This level of public humiliation, based purely on her appearance, crossed a line she hadn't expected anyone to be foolish enough to cross. "Are you accusing me of credit card fraud?" Claire asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm saying that tickets like this don't usually end up in the hands of people like you through conventional means," Jessica replied, apparently too committed to her path of destruction to recognize the warning signs. Amanda finally seemed to realize they'd gone too far. "Jessica, maybe we should—" "No," Jessica cut her off. "I'm tired of these scammers thinking they can waltz into first class. Security!" She raised her voice, calling toward the uniformed airport security officers. "Security, we need assistance with a potential fraud situation." The crowd's murmur grew louder. Phones were recording now, capturing every word of the confrontation. Claire could see the notification lights blinking as videos were being uploaded to social media in real time. Two security officers approached, their expressions professional but wary. The older officer looked uncomfortable with the situation. "What's the issue here?" he asked. Claire smiled slightly. Things were about to get very interesting. "This woman is trying to use a fraudulent first-class ticket," Jessica announced. "She doesn't fit our typical premium passenger profile." The security officer examined Claire's documents. "These appear legitimate. What makes you think they're fraudulent?" "Look at her," Jessica gestured dismissively. "Does she look like someone who can afford $3,000? The officer frowned. "We don't profile passengers based on appearance." "She's obviously scamming the system," Jessica's voice grew shrill. "Probably stole someone's credit card or identity." Kevin muttered to another passenger. "Did she really just say that?" Dorothy confirmed indignantly. "She absolutely did." The security officer had seen enough manufactured drama to recognize it. "I need your supervisor immediately." "I am the supervisor," Amanda said weakly. "Then get the duty manager. This situation is completely inappropriate." More passengers gathered, phones recording the escalating confrontation. The terminal's usual bustle seemed to pause as everyone focused on the drama unfolding at the Atlantic air counter. Claire observed the spectacle with growing disbelief. She'd expected some level of poor service during her incognito travel, but this blatant discrimination exceeded even her most cynical expectations. The two employees seemed completely oblivious to how badly they were representing their company and creating a public relations nightmare. The irony wasn't lost on her. Here she was, being judged unworthy by employees of a company where she held significant influence. Their prejudice was about to cost them far more than they could imagine. "Ladies," Claire said quietly, her voice carrying a warning they were too arrogant to heed. "You might want to reconsider your approach here." Jessica laughed harshly, emboldened by what she perceived as support from her supervisor. "Is that supposed to be some kind of threat?" The challenge hung in the air like a loaded weapon. "Ma'am, I understand you're upset," Greg said, trying to regain control of the situation. But threatening the airline isn't going to... I'm not threatening anyone, Claire interrupted smoothly. I'm simply stating facts. Your employees have created a situation that goes far beyond poor customer service. This is discrimination, harassment, and defamation of character, all documented on multiple phones and probably already spreading across social media. She gestured to the crowd of passengers, many of whom were indeed still recording. The terminal's ambient noise seemed to fade as more people gathered to watch the unfolding drama. Jessica, apparently unable to read the room, stepped forward again. Greg, don't let her intimidate you. She's just some random woman trying to cause trouble, probably hoping for a free upgrade or compensation. The security officer shook his head in disbelief. Ma'am, you really need to stop talking. Why should I stop? Jessica demanded. I'm protecting this airline from scammers and fraudsters. That's my job. No, Claire said quietly. Your job is customer service, and you've failed spectacularly at that. Greg was beginning to sweat. Something about Claire's composure in the face of increasingly hostile accusations suggested she wasn't just another angry passenger. Ms. Donovan, perhaps we could discuss this privately? Oh, I think we're well past privacy, Claire replied. Your employees chose to make this a public spectacle. Jessica here accused me of credit card fraud in front of dozens of witnesses. She suggested I was a criminal, a scammer, and unworthy of first-class service based purely on my appearance. Dorothy Phillips nodded emphatically. That's exactly what happened. I heard every word. Kevin Russell held up his phone. And I've got it all recorded. This is going to be everywhere by tonight. Amanda finally seemed to grasp the seriousness of the situation. Ms. Donovan, on behalf of Atlantic Air, I sincerely apologize for any misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Claire's eyebrows rose. Your colleague accused me of criminal activity. She suggested I was too poor, too common, too unworthy to sit in first class. She called security based on nothing more than my choice to wear comfortable clothes while traveling. Where exactly is the misunderstanding in that? Greg's phone was buzzing insistently in his pocket. He could only imagine the emergency calls already coming in from corporate as word of the incident spread. Let me ask you something, Mr. Wallace, Claire continued. How much do you think this kind of publicity is worth to Atlantic Air? How much is your stock price going to drop when this video hits the major news networks? Because I guarantee you, it will. The confidence in her voice was absolute. This wasn't an empty threat from an angry passenger. This was someone who understood exactly how corporate scandals unfolded in the digital age. Who are you? Greg asked, though he was beginning to suspect he really didn't want to know the answer. Claire reached into her small purse and pulled out a business card. The movement was casual, almost careless, but the effect on Greg was immediate and dramatic. His face went white as he read the card. Oh God, he whispered. The business card was simple, elegant, and devastating. Claire Donovan, Chief Executive Officer, Donovan Industries. Below that, in smaller print, Board Member, Atlantic Air Corporation. Greg's hands shook as he held the card. Around him, the crowd was still murmuring, still recording, still completely unaware that they'd just witnessed employees of Atlantic Air publicly humiliate one of their own board members. Ms. Donovan, Greg's voice cracked slightly. We had no idea. Of course you didn't, Claire replied calmly. That was rather the point. I travel incognito occasionally to see how our frontline employees treat ordinary passengers. I never expected to experience this level of discrimination firsthand. Jessica, who had been watching the exchange with growing confusion, suddenly understood. The color drained from her face as the implications hit her. Board member? She whispered. That's correct, Claire said, her voice carrying the authority that had been hidden beneath casual clothes. I own 12% of Atlantic Air stock. I've been on the board for 8 years, and in all that time, I've never been more embarrassed by this company's employees. Amanda looked like she might faint. Ms. Donovan, we're so sorry. If you had known, you would have treated me differently, Claire finished. But that's exactly the problem, isn't it? Your respect, your professionalism, your basic human decency, it's all conditional. It depends on whether you think someone is important enough to deserve it. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the drama and the realization that something significant was happening. Dorothy Phillips looked vindicated, while Kevin Russell was grinning broadly as his phone continued recording. "The question now," Claire continued, "is what Atlantic Air intends to do about this situation. Because I can tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to call an emergency board meeting. I'm going to recommend a complete review of our customer service policies and our hiring practices. And I'm going to suggest that we reconsider our employment relationships with individuals who think it's acceptable to accuse paying customers of criminal activity based on their appearance." Greg was rapidly calculating the disaster unfolding before him. "Ms. Donovan, surely we can resolve this internally?" "Internally?" Claire's laugh was sharp. "Mr. Wallace, there are currently at least 15 people recording this conversation. It's probably already on social media. By tonight, it'll be on the news. There is no internally anymore." She turned to address the crowd directly. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know that what you've witnessed here today does not represent the values that Atlantic Air is supposed to uphold. These employees acted on their own prejudices, not company policy." "But it is company culture," called out a voice from the crowd. "If they felt comfortable acting this way, it means this kind of discrimination is tolerated here." Claire nodded grimly. "You're absolutely right, and that's what's going to change." Jessica, in a last desperate attempt to salvage her position, stepped forward. "Ms. Donovan, I was just doing my job. I was protecting the airline from potential fraud." "You were profiling passengers based on their appearance," Claire cut her off coldly. "That's not protection. That's prejudice." "Your job," Claire continued, her voice carrying the steel that had made her successful in the ruthless world of corporate America, "was to provide professional customer service to every passenger, regardless of how they looked or what they wore. Instead, you chose to embarrass not only me, but your airline, your fellow employees, and yourselves." The terminal had grown unusually quiet around them. Even the usual airport announcements seemed muted as Claire's words carried across the space. "In the past 30 minutes, you've accused a paying customer of fraud, theft, and criminal activity. You've suggested that certain passengers are unworthy of premium services based purely on their appearance. You've called security on someone whose only crime was wearing comfortable clothes while traveling. And you've done all of this in front of dozens of witnesses with recording devices." Greg was frantically texting on his phone, undoubtedly trying to reach corporate headquarters. The damage control would need to start immediately, but Claire suspected it was already too late. "Ms. Donovan," Amanda said desperately, "we're truly sorry. We never meant—" "Intent doesn't matter when the impact is this devastating," Claire replied. "The question is, what kind of training did you receive? What policies were you following? Because if Atlantic Air trains its employees to profile passengers this way, then we have a systemic problem that goes far beyond individual prejudice." Dorothy Phillips spoke up from the crowd. "I've been a loyal Atlantic Air customer for decades, but after witnessing this treatment, I'll be reconsidering my travel arrangements." Several other passengers murmured agreement. The financial implications were already mounting. Claire pulled out her phone and made a call. "David, it's Claire. I need you to schedule an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. Yes, it's urgent, because I'm standing in Boston Logan Airport after being accused of credit card fraud by our own employees. No, I'm not joking." The conversation was brief, but clearly audible to everyone nearby. When she hung up, the gravity of the situation settled over the Atlantic Air employees like a shroud. "Jessica," Claire said quietly, "do you still believe that first-class passengers need to meet certain appearance standards?" Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. "No, ma'am." "Do you still think I look like someone who would commit credit card fraud?" "No, ma'am." "Do you understand that your actions today have potentially cost Atlantic Air millions of dollars in lost revenue, legal fees, and reputation damage?" Jessica nodded, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Claire turned to Greg. "Mr. Wallace, I want a complete incident report on my desk by close of business today. I want the security camera footage preserved. I want statements from every witness. And I want a detailed explanation of how 2 employees felt empowered to treat a customer this way." "Yes, ma'am, absolutely." "Furthermore, I want a comprehensive review of all customer service training materials, hiring practices, and employee evaluation processes. If this behavior is systemic, we're going to root it out completely." The crowd began to disperse slowly, some passengers heading to their gates, while others lingered to see the conclusion of the drama. Claire looked at her boarding pass one final time. "Now, about my flight," Claire said, her tone shifting slightly. "Given the circumstances, I think I'll be making alternative travel arrangements." Greg looked panicked. "Ms. Donovan, please don't let this incident reflect on the entire airline. We have thousands of dedicated employees who would never." "I'm sure that's true," Claire interrupted. "But the fact remains that these two employees felt comfortable acting this way suggests there are cultural issues that need immediate attention." She turned to address the remaining crowd. "I want everyone here to know that I take full responsibility for what happened today. As a board member of Atlantic Air, the behavior of these employees ultimately reflects on the leadership and culture that I helped create. That ends now." Kevin Russell lowered his phone. "Are you really going to fire them?" Claire considered the question carefully. "That decision will be made by HR and senior management, following proper procedures. But I can tell you that there will be consequences. Serious consequences." Amanda stepped forward, her voice shaking. "Ms. Donovan, I have 3 children. I can't lose this job. Please—" "You should have thought about that before you decided to discriminate against passengers," Dorothy Phillips said sharply. "Actions have consequences, dear." Claire's expression softened slightly. "Amanda, I'm not unsympathetic to your situation, but you participated in treating a customer shamefully. You stood by while your colleague made increasingly outrageous accusations. You've both compromised this airline's reputation and values." She paused, looking at both women. "However, I believe in second chances for people who demonstrate genuine remorse and a commitment to change. The question is, are you both willing to undergo comprehensive retraining, sensitivity education, and probationary supervision?" Jessica nodded eagerly. "Yes, absolutely. Anything." "Amanda?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry this happened." Claire addressed Greg again. "I want them both suspended pending a full investigation. If they're retained, it will be with mandatory training, probationary status, and regular monitoring. One more incident of discrimination, and they're terminated immediately." "Understood," Greg replied. "And I want this incident used as a training case study for all customer service employees. Everyone needs to understand that discrimination has no place in our company." She looked around the terminal one last time. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience today. I hope Atlantic Air has the opportunity to serve you better in the future." As Claire walked toward the exit, her small suitcase rolling behind her, she could hear the conversation resuming around the check-in counter. Her phone was already buzzing with calls from board members, executives, and undoubtedly reporters who had gotten wind of the story. The day had taken an unexpected turn, but perhaps it was exactly what Atlantic Air needed. 3 months later, Claire stood at the same Atlantic Air counter in Boston Logan, once again dressed casually for travel. This time, however, the experience was dramatically different. "Good morning, Ms. Donovan," the agent said warmly. "Welcome back to Atlantic Air. It's a pleasure to serve you today." The agent was new. Claire didn't recognize her, but the professionalism was unmistakable. More importantly, she noticed how the agent treated every passenger with the same courtesy, regardless of their appearance or ticket class. The incident had indeed become a catalyst for change. The video of Claire's confrontation with Jessica and Amanda had gone viral, generating millions of views and sparking nationwide conversations about discrimination in customer service. Atlantic Air's stock had initially dropped 12% before recovering as the company implemented comprehensive reforms. Jessica and Amanda had both completed their retraining programs and were working at a different terminal under close supervision. Greg Wallace had been promoted after handling the aftermath with skill and transparency. The company had instituted new hiring practices, mandatory bias training, and customer service standards that applied regardless of passenger appearance or perceived wealth. Most significantly, Atlantic Air had established the Dignity in Service program, ensuring that every customer received respectful treatment. Claire had insisted that the program be named after Dorothy Phillips, the elderly passenger who had stood up for her that day. "Your first-class seat is confirmed," the agent continued. "Would you like priority boarding?" "Actually," Claire smiled, "I think I'll board with everyone else today." As she waited in the general boarding area, Claire reflected on the unexpected lessons of that morning 3 months ago. She'd set out to observe customer service quality, and instead discovered that sometimes the most important changes come from the most uncomfortable experiences. Her phone buzzed with a text from Dorothy Phillips. "Flying Atlantic Air again today. The service was wonderful. Thank you for making a difference." Claire smiled as she typed back, "Thank you for standing up for what was right." When boarding began, Claire noticed something that warmed her heart. Passengers of all backgrounds, dressed in everything from business suits to casual clothes, were being treated with equal respect and professionalism. Sometimes change happened exactly when it was needed most. What an incredible transformation. Claire's experience shows us that standing up for what's right can create lasting change, even in the most challenging circumstances. Sometimes the people we underestimate hold the most power to make a difference. Have you ever witnessed discrimination like this? How do you think you would have reacted in Claire's situation? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspectives. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our inspiring tales of justice and transformation. And let me know in the comments, what city should our next story take place in? Remember, we all have the power to treat others with dignity and respect, regardless of appearances. Sometimes the most ordinary-looking person has an extraordinary story. Until next time, keep believing in the power of positive change.